talk is a little bit for somebody, a little bit for everybody. Let me introduce myself. My name is Chris Weber. I work for the Nerdery as a software engineer. This talk is titled Build Components, Not Pages, but this was title number 5 out of many different titles that I was considering on picking. I probably should have changed it again because this is a talk that's about emerging technology called web components. It is an advanced talk, mainly because I'm going to show a decent amount of code going through some decent amount of examples at the end. It's a talk that talks about where the web has been in its recent past, where it is currently, and where I think it's going to be going in about 3 years. So thank you all for coming. I want to start the talk talking about, oh, I already did that. Oh, yeah, we'll talk about the web as a platform, a platform of development. We'll talk about the web that has been hidden from you intentionally and how we now have the ability to find it again and have the same level of control that browser vendors have in creating their new functionality. And then we'll go through some cool demos. So the web of today, the web of the recent past. The web is accelerating. We can all see that. The amount of new functionality, new capabilities that we as developers have access to is increasing. Remember HTML4? That was cool, right? You can create a table, create a couple of tags together, put it together on your GeoCities page, raw markup. And that was cool because you can make something in a little bit amount of time. You didn't really need a framework. You didn't really need a kind of content management system. You can make a page, and that was cool. But then we started realizing we need more. The web can be more. The web could be not just a series of pages. It could be about applications. And as a result, we started creating a number of other things like HTML5, where we have intelligent fields like the HTML5 date field, or the time field, or the color field. We could add another layer of formatting. That's CSS3. We can add JavaScript applications, things like Backbone, things like Angular.js, these libraries that allow us to make applications completely written in web standard languages, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and even crazy things like Webrtc. That's that icon at the bottom. Webrtc is a standard that just started hitting browsers this year that allows you to make real-time communication applications with your web browser using just DOM, JavaScript, CSS. So the web is accelerating. And as a result, the people who make web browsers have also needed to accelerate. These folks. Every single one of these browser vendors have adopted a rapid development cycle. Yes, even Internet Explorer. Internet Explorer 11 is going to be coming out soon, and I hear it's cool. This time, for real. No. And they've come to realize that instead of the internal fighting and bickering that they've done in the past, it's important to at least agree upon something like how your parser is supposed to parse web pages, how spacing is supposed to be handled within divs, well, not little, but fine-tooth details like that. The most notable example in my mind is Chrome. Chrome, and they've released new revisions so quickly, I've forgotten the statistic, but in my head, I think like every 90 days, there's a new version of Chrome. I used to follow versions of Chrome pretty quickly, and I do a lot of Google+. And I used to put a post, oh, yay, Chrome 28 just came out. Chrome Canary just hit 30. Can you believe that? Chrome has a major minor revision system, and their major revisions refer to the actual release number that they're at, but their minor revisions is far more interesting. Like Chrome Canary is well beyond 1,500 minor revisions since they started. It's clearly, on a daily basis, they're adding new functionality to web browsers, trying to provide us as web developers better tools. But even though they are literally coming out with a new browser every day, both Chrome and the Firefox teams come out with a new version of their browser every day, it's not fast enough. We need to go faster. We need to go faster because the limit on the speed of development isn't the people who are actually making the tools. It's this consensus that we must have in order to release HTML5. Does everyone remember the story of HTML5? How HTML4, right? When that came out, it was one big standard that came out. This is HTML4, and you will know it. HTML5 tried that, and they tried to come up with this huge definition of what HTML5 was, and they quickly realized that's not going to happen. So they broke up the standard into different parts. So this is what an HTML5 color field is, and this is the specification for it, and we can finally agree upon that, and that's going to be a tag. This is what the CSS3 definition is, and you can, and they all came out at different times. The different standards for these web languages came out at different times, and so browsers were able to like incrementally support the new web. And it seems to me that the browser vendors have just finally said, well, that takes too much time. Let's implement new features even before the standards are ready, and then move faster. And so that's why we have this idea of shadow DOM. What if I told you that hidden in between your standard web document is a secret web document that has always been there, but they've never shown it to you? You've never, it's always been extra. It's always been there defining the functionality that you've used, but they've never exposed it until recently. That's what the first thing is. Enter HTML5 fields. I love the HTML5 date field. It's the perfect example of this. You look at that, and you say, well, that's just one field. You look at the definition of what the field is. And whoops. Tests. I didn't reset the demo. There we go. Spoiler. All right. So it's not going to be as cool now. But let's take a look at this field. HTML5 date field. We look at it, it's one tag. Clearly, it's one tag here in the code. Input, type equals date. We look at the field, though. Boy, that's really at the top, isn't it? We look at the field, and it's clearly not one field. We click on the month, and it selects just the month. We clicked on the date, just the date. We got this incrementer here. That's not one thing. That's a series of things. We got a date picker. We got this X. You know, don't lie to me. That's not one thing. That's many things. So in Chrome, recent versions of Chrome, stable versions of Chrome, you can go to the settings, and you can tell it to show you the shadow DOM. And then if we refresh the page, we can go back to our date field. And we see that it's not one thing. You can expand it. And it has a document fragment. The document fragment has the parts. It's got a part for the calendar picker that we saw. We can expand the date field so that we see the different parts of it. Like here's the month. And here's even a div for the separator. And here's a part for the day, and so on. So they've been compiling a set of markup and possibly behaviors, because we click on the arrow, and it knows to launch the date picker. We click on the up and down arrows, and it cycles through months. So it's not just that it has extra markup that it was hiding from you. It was hiding all kinds of these behaviors, intelligence they built into the field. And why not? Maybe they also hid some styles. We got this user style sheet here on the side. And they are trying to find a default look and feel for their field. So they hid markup, styles, and behaviors into a custom field. And the reason why they're showing us this trick, this magic trick that they've been doing on us for years, is because they're telling average web developers, this is your magic trick now. We have showed you the spell. Now you can do it as well. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Web components. Oh, one other thing. Every field is a web component. Even standard run-of-the-mill text fields has a document fragment, which is a simple div. I don't know why they did that. I mean, it could have just been a text field. But from an architectural point of view, it's important. You can create a field that has a template, something like a template, and just create behaviors to replace the values of that template. Right, so that's what this talk is about. It's about pulling back the veil and talking about Shadow DOM, which we just did. We're also going to be talking about how to make your own custom element. And we're also going to talk about how to create a template that your custom element can use so that you can inform your web page of that custom fields, its behaviors, its structure, so that every time you render a custom element, it will reuse that look and feel, that template. I'm getting ahead of myself. So first up, building custom elements. There is a new tag called element. This is the old way of doing it. It's actually moved on from here. And in your element tab, you can describe just general markup that you want to use. You would use something like this if you want that same section that says I'm and foo. Is that even proper grammar? To be rendered every time you use an xfoo tag. And you would create your custom element in this way. You would register that custom field into the DOM. What you see in the this.register, that's simply a polyfill for browsers that don't understand custom elements, so they can also use this field. In the future, where the element tag is a part of the standard, you won't need that. And so you would use this tag by simply saying, like in your tag, like angle bracket xfoo, and then you can use this custom field anywhere in your site. With templates, there is a template tag, and you can define what the general markup for that tag is. And every time you use a template tag within your site, that markup is rendered into the DOM, but it is rendered inert. It's never shown unless you use it. And you would use it by executing a script, and that script is simply just putting the markup into a variable and then setting the values of that image tag. These are two tools for creating your own custom elements. If you were to put it all together, you would create a custom element that defines a template that outputs other kinds of tags. And I think I missed a step here where I was talking about menu item. This is an example of how you can create a custom element that uses custom elements. I also forgot to mention, if you have any questions, please stop me and ask the questions. because I do tend to nerd out about stuff like this. Frederick.
I know a lot of this is like we use a lot in Angular. I mean, in terms of like what templating and tags are and how you can nest stuff. Is this, since this is kind of coming in, or since it exists behind the scenes with HTML5, is it because Google is pushing this, and that the other browser, is this like something that the Webrtc body is adopting, and Angular just happens to be a reflection in terms of how you build stuff?
It's a very good question. When you say Google is pushing this, the answer to that is yes. But it's not because of Angular. It's because when you talk to people who are trying to approach web development from like a software engineering point of view, they're all looking for reusable components that they can reuse within their applications. And web components has been an idea, and I actually have a slide for that one. It's been an idea that's been around for a long time. It's not a means to push Angular as a JavaScript application framework. It's a means to promote the idea that, hey, we all want reusable components, and this is one way that we can do it. So what I'm trying to say in this slide, sorry, not very well, is that this is how you create a custom element. You can create an element that has a template that can, whenever it's used, be generated out on the page. And this is how you would call that element out on the page. You would simply, actually, this is how you import the element, and then this is how you would use it. It's simply its own custom tag. Does anyone have any questions about that? Because I feel like I've glossed over a few things.
I think in your last two examples, there was inline JavaScript within the, okay, so there wasn't inline JavaScript with the template element, but I guess I'm asking, does the example in the next slide also require inline JavaScript? Or was that I thought it was a fallback. Yeah, I think that's much clearer. Use the element. Is that a fallback? Is that only JavaScript, or is that required?
Good. The registering of the tag was a fallback. This part here, actually, what we see here is that in addition to registering it, there's a prototype here where it's adding a behavior to the element so that when it's ready, it goes ahead and makes an alert to the page. So yes, part of it's a callback, but you're also able to give your custom element custom behaviors. And so you would associate your custom tag with extra scripts. Oh, repeat the question. The question was, there's a bit of confusion in what I'm saying with the extra scripts that are associated to these custom tags, and if the extra JavaScript is necessary. It's necessary if you want it to give your tag extra behaviors. Okay. So I see some confused faces, and I. The shadow DOM can have something called a Mutation Observer, where it's able to detect the change of data and, as a result, change the display of the element. So, does shadow DOM as a standard have the capability of bubbling up events back to the DOM? And the correct answer is that the shadow DOM handles itself. The shadow DOM element is an effort to create a fully encapsulated bit of markup, styles, and scripts so that you can build it in such a way so that it doesn't affect anything else that's going on in the DOM. The only way that it would actually affect like some other element somewhere else on the page, or if an event that you happen to have in an element in the shadow DOM affects something else in the page, is if you actually coded that up yourself. So there's nothing that prevents that cross-pollination of events and actions, but by default, it tries to encapsulate everything into one component. Okay. Please ask more questions. Okay. So this seems kind of rough, doesn't it? This seems kind of like we can create a custom element, we can have a template, we can have all this JavaScript up, but that's kind of like the equivalent of the old days where we just coded everything up by hand. And that's why the Google engineers are working on a framework called Polymer. And Polymer has many parts. What we see in this graph is that there are many parts of the library Polymer that informs your browser how to handle web components, the standard as the Google engineers see it. This section demonstrates that there are many parts of what web components need that are actually being built into the browser itself. And the red section denotes that there are extra capabilities that we need to teach browsers. Things like mutation observers. MDV stands for model-driven views. Being able to have data models that drive the behaviors of different displays of components. And these are all polyfills. These libraries are there because the standards built into the browsers aren't smart enough. And eventually, they will go away. And those all libraries make up a platform.js. And then the Polymer.js creates the framework for displaying different components together. And then they have their own element libraries that together make up this small little demo application that we'll see later called Pika. And so essentially, they're building a framework into your browser that is capable of handling display, is capable of rendering custom elements that you make that are intelligent enough in order to handle custom data that you send it. Whenever I think about this, I think about like standard model view controller programming practices. Like if you were to build a custom application, my experience is a lot in .NET. So ASP.NET MVC, you create a custom application with the model view controller platform, and then all of your views are feeding data from controllers, and your data models are creating the structure of your application. And it sounds like this library is intending to take over all or part of that. I feel like I'm talking myself into circles. I'm not very good with these things, but let me just jump to a demo to show you what I'm talking about. Would that help?
Yes.
Okay. So this is a demo of a chart component. And if we look at the markup of the chart component, it simply is a chart.js component. It's using the chart.js JavaScript library. So if we jump into the code, we see that it's only importing one file. It's using the polymer.js, and it's magically working. But if we look at the included file, there's a lot more going on. The Polymer library uses this Polymer element tag instead of the standard element tag so that it can add extra logic to it. But the action is happening mainly in the canvas. And if you used chart.js before, you would see that this is exactly how the library likes to behave. You give it a canvas tag, and you activate it with JavaScript, and it's happy. This style attached to the host, Ampersand host, is a way of saying, make these styles contained to just this element. And then feed it with logic and initial properties, like if we were to refresh this, it would show a random graph style. So that's all it needs. And if you were to make an application, oh, that's a different tab, isn't it? If you were to make an application, you would simply have to drop this tag in, and then you would have a chart. How many times have you needed to make a chart for some kind of data-heavy application? And wouldn't it have been great to just give it the data points and not have to worry about the formatting?
How do you pass the data in? Looks like you coded it in.
Well, yeah, this particular, we'll see examples later on where it's actually, it's actually taking data from an included file. But to your question was, how do you get the data in? The data can come from anywhere. The data can come from like a RESTful service. The data could come from an included file that, like the other demos will show. But the point is that you're setting up a custom tag that once you give it the data, it behaves properly. It's one piece of the process. Is that helpful? Okay. So what do we have here? I kind of riffed off of this. So your question was, if you're creating a web component, can you make?
I created a web component,
right?
And I have my own CSS in there.
Right.
But then you're going to use my component in your website. You want to override my CSS.
Right.
So you have a flag in JavaScript that you can set that's available in any component, like right off the bat or not.
So I'm going to interpret your question this way. If I make a web component, I spend all these hours to make this great web component, and I drop it into my website, and my website just happens to override the styles of my web component, what do I do? Doesn't that suck? The answer is, yes, that would suck, if that is how it would work. But by defining the styles to the custom element, the @host, it knows to apply the styles just to that element so that styles don't bleed out, but it also encapsulates the styles to just that component, so styles that are happening outside of the DOM don't bleed in. So it's a self-contained, encapsulated component that is happy to live no matter how crazy the application is that you drop it in. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yeah, what do we have here? We have the ability to create our own tags. We are enabled to be the creators of our own library of components that we can reuse in multiple applications. If we wanted to create our custom table field, we could do that. Like in an example that I deleted like a week before this presentation, I created a nice tag where it was a smiley face. You would drop that smiley face in wherever you wanted. If you wanted to bundle up really smart application logic into a tag and then reuse that across multiple applications or multiple places within your applications, you could do that. Does this sound familiar to you? Does this goal sound familiar? Because that's basically what Jquery Ui is, right? It's got sliders, it's got data tables, you know. I like to think that this is like ASP.NET Web Forms. Does anyone remember ASP.NET Web Forms fondly? Wasn't that a terrible idea? Turns out the idea wasn't terrible. It's just that the fact that Microsoft was involved, that was the terrible part. ActiveState, come on. So the idea isn't bad. We want to be able to reuse multiple components. We want to make it easier for web applications and web developers to use advanced technologies. Here's another example. Cold Fusion. Oh, that was a much larger image. That was hilarious. Does anyone ever code Cold Fusion? That's where I started. Cold Fusion. CF table, get out. CF graph, oh my God. It was a pain. But it was a pain not because we were using components. It was a pain because the components were theirs. They were the ones that wrote the components. They were the ones that understood the components. You had to apply your knowledge of web development to a tag-based kind of structure, but you didn't have the freedom to create your own tags. At least, well, in Cold Fusion you could, but it was, you had to learn Java. It's a pain in the ass. Yes, there is a difference. There is a difference between these different approaches and what we have now. What we have now is that we can create our own tags. So let's see some more examples. But before, questions. I know you got them. Yeah.
It's all kind of compiled in a way that looks great, and if I was developing on my own, it would be great. But if I actually had to bring people working together and actually explain to them how they were going to merge their code so it would work in a manner where if one thing happened, it would be fine.
Sure. The question was, how does the introduction of something like web components change, like projects, the natural give and take of who does what. And I have a slide for that, but I'll talk about that now. With web components, with its ability to create its own kind of custom markup, its own kind of language, its own grammar about how things can be displayed with web components, specifically in the context of Drupal or some kind of system that has control over both the back end and the front end. It certainly doesn't do a better job of handling data models. It certainly doesn't do a better job of grabbing data or making that data available to another system. Things like Drupal 8 and its RESTful service does a great job of handling that job. Where it's focused on and where it changes the landscape a little bit is the rendering layer, the theming layer, where it can take raw data and it can render that data in its own custom fields. So something like Drupal's theming layer, where we teach a lot of developers, this is how you make a template. That knowledge is important, but where it could make a difference is requiring a content management system like Drupal to do less. If everyone knows web components and can create their own web components, and that's just common knowledge, then Drupal wouldn't have to do that. If they're already going to create web components, they're already coming to a content management system and saying, well, just give me the data. Then, yeah, so if the expectation changes, if the culture changes around let's build web components first versus your CMS needs to provide me a theming layer and I need to like it, then things would be different. So from the perspective of like purely custom-driven, you're doing it custom, so it's going to be different every time, right? Or you're going to standardize on things that you have developers that really know that well. So again, if people really know web components well, then the system that you have to make as a back-end developer needs to do less. You don't have to worry, like from the Drupal context, you don't need to worry about field formatters. You don't need to worry about field templates or anything else other than how do I get my data structured exactly the way I want it, and how do I present that data to another system?
Would that speed up rendering the pages?
Would think so. I mean, I don't have any raw data on that. And I'm really interested in actually getting some good numbers on that. But in theory, if your PHP processor is doing less work, it's going to get done faster. Yes, I knew you had a question.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I watched the Drupal introduction of this.
Okay.
And I mean, from my perspective, I mean, we're not talking about things that are enormously going to change Drupal. We're talking about things that are going to change, like if you want the chosen JavaScript widget that takes your drop down and turns into a nice searchable drop down. You won't need things like that. You install something that changes that tag, and all of a sudden you have a nice drop down with a search field in it. Instantaneous with JavaScript and all your Angular and everything. You interact with that the same way. All it's doing is giving you an embeddable
Yes.
type to add additional functionality. It's not going to change how Drupal does it. It's a new element.
I agree partly. I agree that it does change the user interaction of, I need to find that chosen library, that chart.js library, and now I need to make sure that my CMS is including it on the page because I just need it for that one case and stuff like that. Or a slideshow.
Downloading all this stuff and having it all formatted like passive images online.
Right. You can create a template that is a slideshow, and it's got another template that is a slide and stuff like that. Those are things we would normally do, and from like a Drupal context, we would create a content type for the slides. But maybe now, from a Drupal context, all we need to really do is to create the proper data model that is providing that component. But here's the thing. With Polymer, their philosophy is everything's a tag. Everything from your slideshow element, your chart element, to full-fledged applications. That's part of what I'm about to demo. You could, theoretically, you could build all the intelligence of Drupal's front end, all of the intelligence of the back-end administrative system into one tag, and then just render that one tag on the page. Would you want to do that? I don't know. But maybe let's postpone the full answer, and let's just go through a couple demos, and maybe I can change your mind. Whoa, we don't see that well at all. So first example is their YouTube application that they wrote as a Polymer tag. And this is an application. This isn't just a tag. It has intelligence. We're able to search things like Grumpy Cat. And we have results. These results, maybe it would help if I showed what's going on behind the scenes. The app is simply one tag. It's a YouTube app, and it has many parts. Maybe we can get to those parts if we have the included files. JavaScript. OK. Here is the included file, and that file has many different components as well. So we created an application that is made up of components, and those are components, things like the app bar at the top, I might just have to jump into PHP Storm to show the full anatomy of this. But you get what I'm saying, right? This is an application made up of components. It has intelligence. It does a request out to a YouTube API, and it gets back results of different videos it could display. If I jump back to the application, which is here, I can click on a video, and it will go out to YouTube, and it will play the video. And I don't appear to have sound. My wife loves that cat. And it's got actionable buttons on it. Not exactly sure what that was supposed to do. It's able to create this text field to have voice input. And so here's an example of a full-fledged application, not just a tag, that you can have made with the Polymer architecture of custom fields. Let's see if I can. Next example. This is the one that showed up at Google I/O. This is an application made up of components to make components that drive applications. It is the meta example. You can drop in a caption. You can drop in other things. And then you can click this tag to show you this custom element that you are building as if you were back in Dreamweaver and you were dropping things in from a palette. I don't even have to say back in Dreamweaver because you can do this in Visual Studio right now if you wanted to. I don't know why you would want to. But yeah, we're constructing a menu here, and then in the Google I/O demo, they were showing how you can data bind these different things. You can create properties and stuff like that. This is the example I love showing. Where is it? Sandbox app. You drop a sandbox in a sandbox. Because it's a tag. It's a tag that exists as an application, fully self-contained, all of the behaviors fully self-contained. You can do, I don't know why you would want to do this, but you could do it. You could drop that tag into any page with the Polymer library included, and then you have your own site builder right there. So imagine if we could introduce something like this on like a node edit page, where in addition to building the data model for something, you're building the display of something like as custom elements. Crazy idea, right? Actually possible. And then Pika. I teased this one, so I should show it. This is more of an example of a real-life application that you would want to do. And it's really just a gallery. It's more than just a grid of images. You can click on an image, and you get information about that specific image and the images that are related to it. You can click further. You got a detail. So yes, if you wanted to build a Drupal tag that did things, they basically did that with you know, teaser views of content and detailed views of content. So here's the thing that gets me. This is now. This is today. This Git pull that I did last week brought me all of this stuff that they're actually been working on and completely changed my presentation. It was kind of a bummer, but kind of exciting too, because this isn't really going to be a thing until a couple years from now. I'm guessing like 3 years. Like, people will start talking about web components and start saying, hey, I learned this cool new thing called web components, and it's going to change the way I do development. Well, this is something that we could start learning now, and it would be kind of cool, kind of a pet project, side project, but eventually, this could be our job. This could completely be like what we do to earn money, building components and being able to build self-contained components and selling that off to somebody. I imagine, like as a consulting firm, you can walk in talking to a client, and they just want to see your style guide. Show me the things of all the different components you have, and maybe I'll see a few that I want to use or something like that. A development house can be the next Jquery Ui provider, the ones that have built in the correct number of components, the right kind of components that a customer is looking for. So. Chrome stable. Yeah.
It's working stable now?
Well, okay, let me show you the code. Because what's happening is that it's Chrome stable, but the Polymer library has all the polyfills.
Oh, so you're using Polymer.
Right. But here's the thing about the polyfills, is that they're actively working to build this intelligence into the browser so that you don't need the polyfills.
Yeah, yeah.
And eventually, this same code running in the browser like 3 years from now will have to do a lot less. These same components we build today could be reused 3 years from now.
Yeah, I just asked because I heard that with Canary you could run without the plugin.
That's not exactly true.
And then I looked for Linux for the Canary, and then they are not.
No, they don't make Canary for Linux.
So then I said, oh, he's using Linux, so how?
Yeah. However, probably by the time you heard that, that was like Canary 20 or Chrome 27 or 28. 28 stable now. Yeah. So, yeah.
You know, so you said, so the other browsers, you said like 11 has talked about this. I'm assuming IE 11 has talked about this. Firefox. I mean, is there anything on their roadmap that has been published?
So the people who are working on this architecture, the Polymer architecture, are targeting what they call evergreen browsers, the browsers that are the newest, basically. So this works in IE. This works in IE 11, definitely. I was able to get early demonstrations working in IE 8, creating custom fields and stuff like that. But that's really just a silly, simple polyfill of trying to inform your browser of this custom tag you're writing. What they're doing right here probably wouldn't work in IE 8 or old IE. But it definitely works in Firefox. It works in Opera, because Opera is now using the same architecture as Chrome.
Does it work in 9 and 10 too?
I don't think it would work in 9. And I haven't tested it with 10. But I think it does work in 10. 5 minutes. I kind of talked about what this means for Drupal already. I'm kind of excited, kind of scared about this idea, because we now have a very great theming layer in Drupal. It doesn't have to be a replacement. It doesn't have to take over, because it's all about custom tags. And if you can create your templates to create custom tags, you have both. You have both the ability to programmatically handle the display of something from like a back-end point of perspective, and programmatically taking over the control and behavior and style of something from a front-end perspective. It just depends on what army you bring to the battle. If you have people that are really good front-end developers and they like to completely operate outside of the context of a CMS, then you can do that. Or if you need to have really good Drupal sites built with the Drupal theming engine because you got a really great Drupal team, you can do that. But the point is that the web is moving, and it has always been moving, and we had always known that. But they're moving in a direction where the complete display of something can happen in the browser. Your browser can be the theming engine of your site. Last chance for questions.
So would you say, I'll just use myself as an example. So like 10 years ago, right, wasn't good at PHP. And over time, I've learned stuff and whatever. So I kind of feel like now, I feel the same way about, maybe not as bad, but my JavaScript skills aren't on the same level, right? But obviously, with Angular, Backbone, to whatever it is, to even these web components, right, there's a JavaScript component in terms of the interaction. So when you talk about the market of back-end developers and front-end developers, you kind of have this gap where either you are a developer who is really good at JavaScript and happens to either come from the back or come from the front end. And with these web components, it seems that, what do you think is going to drive, I guess, a lot of the interaction, since the web components, project that you can do most interaction from the front end perspective? Do you think it's a lot more back-end developers learning those complex pieces from the JavaScript, or do you think it's more the front-end developers kind of building the style of the components, and then, maybe they know a little bit, but they're still...
So the question was about architecture, right, and about where do we expect to see like most of the behaviors, most of the action to be happening from like an architectural point of view.
Right.
And I have to say that from with this, from my perspective, what we see going on in JavaScript application development, anytime you have an element on a web page that has behaviors, I see that as JavaScript, JavaScript-driven. Anything that is dealing with data-driven or behaviors that change because the data changed. I largely see that as a back-end system, providing that initial set of data. And then when you have a mutation of that data, that's all happening in the browser. So with that reality in place in the future, like a CMS like Drupal doesn't have to do a lot of what it does. It simply just needs to be able to provide you a great tool for creating your data up and delivering that data to a front-end system. And in that way, that back-end system can drive a ton of different things. This Polymer thing is what's probably going to be in web browsers, but Android has something else, and different iOS applications have something else. If you have a good system that is able to build data really quickly and really smartly and provide that to many different systems, then you just have a platform to make all kinds of different things, Facebook applications, things like that. And here's the thing that really excites me. Drupal 8 has all this already. It's got a RESTful API. Isn't that great? It's got everything it needs in order to drive something like this. Just saying. Further reading. For some reason, on this network, I can't access the Polymer project website. I've tried so many times. There's a website, polymer-project.org, that has a great walkthrough on how to get started. It provides a number of great examples, and it provides a Git repo of all the demos I showed. And then there's the Google Plus page for web components. They have a lot of late-breaking news and different talks that people give about web components. This is still a very new technology, and there's still a lot that they're figuring out along the way, like what's the right way to do things. But it's a great time to start paying attention and getting started. Also, the Polymer chat room on Freenode, great place to hang out. Thank you.